What happens when America's sweetheart walks into a studio known for tearing down its guests? When charm meets provocation head-on, sparks are inevitable. What unfolded that day between Kelly Clarkson and Howard Stern wasn't just an interview. It was a verbal tug-of-war that left even the producers frozen behind the glass. It started like any other high-profile sit-down. Howard adjusted his mic, that sly grin stretching across his face. Kelly, polished but calm, took her seat, the kind of presence that fills a room before she even says a word. The studio lights dimmed, the on-air sign glowed red, and everyone waited for the moment Howard would strike. "Kelly," he began, tone casual but eyes sharp. "You've always sold this image of being real," grounded one of the people. "But come on, when you've got tens of millions in the bank, how real can you really be?" His voice dripped with mischief. You could hear Robin Quivers shift slightly beside him, bracing for what was coming. Kelly didn't flinch. Her smile stayed, but her gaze locked on him. "Howard, success doesn't cancel authenticity. I've never claimed to struggle. I've always said I'm grateful for what I've earned." "Grateful?" Howard leaned in, the smirk widening. "Sure, but you're mentoring people on The Voice about chasing dreams while you're wearing what looks like a small car on your wrist. Isn't that just a little rich, pun intended?" The studio went still. A single breath felt loud enough to cut through the tension. Kelly's reply came smooth, measured. "This watch? A gift. And, for the record, there's nothing shameful about having success when you've worked for it. I didn't have family in the business. I didn't have connections. I started from a singing competition, remember? And I've been grinding ever since." Howard's laugh filled the room. "Ah, the classic self-made speech. You make it sound like you clawed your way out of a mine. You won a TV show, Kelly. You got handed a record deal. That's not exactly breaking rocks." Kelly's expression tightened, the warmth fading just enough to show steel beneath. "You know what's funny? People like to rewrite stories they've never lived. I've lost my voice mid-tour, worked through vocal surgery, done endless nights away from my kids, and smiled through interviews where I'm treated like a headline, not a person. That's not being handed anything, Howard." The room held its breath again. Robin's eyes darted to Howard, who now leaned forward with that gleam of satisfaction he gets when he smells friction. "This is my job, Kelly," he said smoothly. "I ask the questions everyone else is too scared to ask. You're the nation's darling. Someone's got to keep it real." Kelly's reply was calm, but the fire behind it was impossible to miss. "There's a difference between being real and being cruel, Howard. You've built a career on making people squirm and calling it honesty. But that's not real. It's just showmanship in disguise." From the very first exchange, it was clear this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. The laughter in the control booth had faded. Producers glanced nervously at one another, realizing that this conversation was starting to take on a life of its own. Howard leaned forward again, his tone sharpening just enough to draw blood without breaking skin. "Come on, Kelly. Everyone wants to hear how this fairy tale really works. You talk about hard work and struggle, but let's not pretend. You've been in the spotlight since day one. You've had every door opened for you." Kelly's smile thinned. "Opened? You think a door opens itself just because you're on TV? I've spent 20 years proving that one lucky break doesn't define you. You don't stay here without putting in the work." Howard grinned. "Oh, so we're rewriting history now? You were just another voice in a competition, and suddenly you're talking about grit and grind like you built the whole thing from scratch." This time, Kelly didn't blink. She leaned slightly closer to the mic. "Howard, I respect what you've built, but minimizing other people's effort doesn't make your truth more valid. You think winning meant I stopped working? That was the beginning. I've toured until my throat gave out. I've done press on no sleep. I've earned what I have." Robin tried to step in, but Howard waved her off, his eyes locked on Kelly like a cat watching a flicker of movement. "You sound defensive," he said with a smirk. "It's just an observation." Kelly's tone turned cooler. "It's not defensive when you correct someone twisting your story. You like to push people until they crack, right? That's your thing?" Howard's laugh filled the room again, low and mocking. "My thing? My thing is truth. People love to hear themselves praised, not challenged. You're used to everyone being nice. I'm just cutting through the fluff. Kelly shook her head slightly. There's a difference between truth and cruelty. You can ask tough questions without trying to humiliate someone. Howard leaned back, pretending to look impressed. So now I'm cruel. You're the one who came here talking about kindness like it's your superpower. Maybe you just don't like being questioned. The tension was thick enough to taste. The studio monitors buzzed faintly as if they were nervous too. Kelly's voice softened but carried weight. I can take criticism, Howard. I've taken it my whole career. But there's a line between curiosity and disrespect. You cross it because it gets a reaction. That's not honesty. That's entertainment. For a moment, even Howard didn't reply. He studied her, that smirk fading just slightly. The crew behind the glass stayed frozen, not daring to breathe. Kelly had met his stare head-on, unshaken. Howard finally leaned closer to his mic. So what do you want, Kelly? Applause for standing your ground? You came here knowing exactly who I am. She met his tone with calm precision. I came here expecting a conversation, not an ambush. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was electric. Both of them knew this was only the beginning. The pause between them stretched, heavy and deliberate. You could almost hear the hum of tension vibrating through the air. Every producer behind the glass looked frozen, waiting to see which way the conversation would turn. Howard leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice lowering into that infamous growl. You call it an ambush, I call it honesty. Nobody ever asks you what people really think. You sell this girl-next-door story while sitting on millions. Isn't that just a little bit polished? Kelly's lips curved into a restrained smile. You're confusing real life with branding. I've never hidden my success, Howard. I've just tried to stay human in an industry that doesn't reward it. Howard tilted his head as if amused. Human, huh? Must be nice being human in a mansion. That was the moment the temperature in the room shifted. Kelly didn't laugh, didn't flinch. You know what's funny? You act like money erases character. I've met plenty of rich people who are miserable, and plenty of broke people who are kind. Who I am isn't for sale. Robin tried again to step in, but Howard's hand shot up. No, I like this side of her, he said, almost entertained, finally dropping the sweet act. Tell me, Kelly, how long have you been rehearsing this humble, honest superstar thing? Kelly's tone sharpened like glass. You mistake authenticity for performance because that's all you know. Maybe not everyone is playing a part, Howard chuckled, the sound echoing through the studio. You think I'm the fake one? You've turned vulnerability into a brand, Kelly. Every tear, every emotional story, perfectly timed for the cameras. You've monetized sincerity. Kelly leaned closer to the mic, her voice firm but calm. And you've monetized cruelty. You get ratings by making people squirm. You confuse discomfort with depth. The line hit like a hammer. Even Robin went quiet. Howard smirked, but the flicker of surprise was there. At least I don't pretend. I say what everyone else thinks. Kelly didn't back off. No, you say what hurts most because you think it makes you brave. But it doesn't take courage to break people down. It takes courage to build them up. For a brief second, Howard looked like he might actually respond with something softer, but the instinct kicked in. So, what? This is your moment to fix me, to make the big bad interviewer see the light. Kelly's expression didn't change. No, I just think it's sad that you've built a career making people feel small when you could have used that same voice to lift them up. The crew exchanged glances. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a mirror being held up, and neither side liked what they saw. Howard crossed his arms, pretending to stay unfazed. You came here to promote your album, right? Or was it to give me a therapy session? Kelly exhaled through her nose, keeping her tone measured. I came here for a conversation. You turned it into a confrontation. That's on you. The on-air light glowed brighter as if amplifying the silence that followed. Howard smirked again, but his posture was tighter now. He was used to control, and for the first time in years, he'd lost it. The next few seconds felt like a staring contest that could set the studio on fire. Howard's smirk had hardened into something sharper, while Kelly's calm confidence stayed anchored, unbothered by the storm brewing across from her. Let's call it what it is, Howard said finally, breaking the silence. You came here for exposure. You know this show gets headlines. So why pretend to be shocked when you get a real conversation instead of a puff piece? Kelly exhaled softly, keeping her voice measured. A real conversation doesn't have to mean tearing someone down. You can be direct without being destructive. Howard leaned in, elbows on the desk. Direct, that's what this is. Everyone else treats you like glass, afraid to ask anything that doesn't fit your brand. I'm not afraid. That's why this works. Kelly's tone sharpened just slightly. If making people uncomfortable is the only way something works, maybe the format's broken. Robin looked uneasy now, glancing toward the producer behind the glass, who mouthed something about going to commercial. Howard ignored them. Broken? Howard echoed with a laugh. You think my show is broken because I ask questions people actually want to hear the answers to? Kelly met his gaze head-on. I think your show confuses confrontation with connection. You poke until someone snaps and then call it authenticity. It's not bravery, it's baiting. For once, Howard didn't jump right back in. His eyes narrowed, analyzing her words like he was trying to find a weak spot. He finally asked, almost quieter, So, you think I'm fake? Kelly hesitated just long enough for the tension to twist tighter. I think you've convinced yourself that being cruel makes you honest. But honesty doesn't need to humiliate people. The air in the room thickened. Robin leaned back in her chair, clearly realizing this wasn't just another segment. They were watching a clash of philosophies play out in real time. Howard smirked, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. You talk about kindness like it's some badge of honor. You ever think maybe being nice all the time is just another form of control? A way to stay safe? Kelly's expression softened but didn't break. Kindness isn't weakness, Howard. It's a choice, and it's a lot harder than sitting behind a mic and throwing punches. For the first time, Howard didn't immediately have a comeback. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the desk, visibly recalibrating. You've got guts, he said finally, half grinning. I'll give you that. Kelly leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. Not guts, just boundaries. The moment hung between them. You could feel every person in the studio holding their breath, aware they were witnessing something unscripted, something that cut deeper than celebrity gossip ever could. Howard's grin flickered again, like a man who'd realized he wasn't steering the ship anymore. All right, Kelly, he said. You want to play it that way? Let's really talk. Kelly folded her hands, ready. I've been waiting for that since the moment I sat down. The red light above the glass stayed on. The show was still live, and what came next would define the interview people wouldn't stop talking about for years. Howard's grin returned, but it looked tighter this time, almost forced. You've got an answer for everything, he said, his voice low. Tell me, Kelly, when did you learn how to flip the script like this? You've turned every jab into a sermon. Kelly gave a small shrug. You're used to people playing defense. I'm not here to win or lose, Howard. I'm just not letting you rewrite who I am. Howard laughed, that famous deep laugh that used to rattle guests. Rewrite who you are. You're a public figure. Your story's already been written 100 times by the media. I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. Maybe you should try listening instead of assuming, Kelly replied, her voice firm but even. You've already decided what kind of person I am. You're not curious. You're confirming your bias. The words hit like a clean punch. Robin's eyes widened slightly. She'd seen Howard's sharpest guests, but few had kept their composure this long. Howard leaned closer, his tone darker. My bias? Let's not pretend you don't play the game too. You've sold the whole relatable mom from Texas brand while cashing checks bigger than half this city. I'm just saying what people won't. Kelly smiled again, but this time it wasn't friendly. It was razor-edged. And I'm saying being successful doesn't make you less real. You can have money and still have a heart. It's not a contradiction unless you want it to be. Howard smirked, but there was a flicker of something. Maybe respect, maybe frustration. You're really not backing down, are you? Why should I? Kelly said softly. You're not asking questions. You're testing limits. But I'm not breaking. Howard's tone turned colder. Maybe you're just scared to admit the truth. You need people to like you. That's why you can't handle real confrontation. Kelly leaned forward, the microphone catching every word. "No, Howard. I can handle confrontation. What I don't do is confuse cruelty with courage. That's your mistake, not mine." The silence afterward wasn't just quiet, it was thick. It was the kind of moment radio lives for, when words hang so heavy that even static feels meaningful. Howard tried to shake it off with a forced chuckle. "So what now? You're going to psychoanalyze me on my own show." Kelly didn't blink. "You call it analysis. I call it reflection." Robin cleared her throat, trying to lighten the mood. "Howard, maybe we should—" "No," Howard interrupted. "She wants real talk? Let's go there." Kelly folded her hands again, ready. "I've been waiting for real talk since minute 1. For a long beat, Howard said nothing. Then he leaned into the mic again, his tone quieter but more dangerous. "All right, Kelly, let's talk about what's real. The difference between image and truth." The red light above the studio door glowed brighter. Everyone inside knew something big was coming next. The studio had gone completely still. You could almost feel the tension vibrating in the air as Howard's tone dropped, slow and deliberate. "Let's stop pretending for a second. You've built a brand around being the genuine one. But nobody stays that polished without a script. Tell me, Kelly, how much of what people see is real and how much is packaging?" Kelly tilted her head, eyes steady. "You think being authentic means being messy all the time. It doesn't. I don't have to fall apart on camera to prove I'm real. What you see is what I am, flaws included," Howard smirked. "Flaws included? That's a neat line. Sounds rehearsed." Kelly's expression didn't move. "That's what people say when they can't understand calm under pressure. Just because you need chaos to feel alive doesn't mean everyone else does." Robin shot Howard a warning glance, but he ignored it. He leaned back in his chair, voice dripping with provocation. "You ever notice how every time someone calls you out, you play the empathy card? It's like your armor. You wrap criticism in kindness so no one can touch you." Kelly's voice dropped an octave, quiet but sharp. "Or maybe I've learned that reacting with grace is the only way to keep from sinking to their level." Howard chuckled, though the edge in his voice betrayed him. "Grace, huh? You mean control. You're terrified of looking bad. That's why this interview bothers you. You can't smile your way through it." Kelly's jaw tightened just enough to reveal the hit landed. But she didn't flinch. "You confuse dignity with fear, Howard. You've built your career making people uncomfortable. I built mine making people feel seen. We're not the same." That line hit hard. The sound engineer behind the glass mouthed "wow" before pretending to keep working. Howard leaned forward again, trying to regain ground. "So now you're the savior? The champion of feelings? Come on, Kelly, this is show business. Everyone's selling something, including you." Kelly met his glare. "Of course I'm selling something. Everyone is. You sell outrage. I sell hope. And I sleep just fine at night." Howard froze for a fraction of a second, long enough for Robin to notice. The studio air crackled. For years, he'd been the one to dictate the rhythm of every confrontation. Now, for once, he was reacting. He finally exhaled, his voice quieter but no less pointed. "You think you're better than this show, don't you? You think you're above what I do." Kelly shook her head. "I don't think I'm better. I think I'm different. You tear people down because you think that's the only way to find truth. I think truth doesn't need destruction. It needs honesty without cruelty." Howard stared at her, his posture stiff, his expression unreadable. The crew didn't dare move. The mics picked up nothing but breathing. Then Howard spoke again, almost like a challenge. "You really believe that? You think kindness is power?" Kelly nodded once. "I don't think it. I know it." That sentence landed harder than any insult could. For the first time, Howard didn't have an immediate comeback. Howard's eyes narrowed, his usual confidence starting to crack. The tension in the studio was no longer performative. It was real, alive, almost pulsing through the air. "You really think you've got me figured out, don't you?" he said finally, his tone half amusement, half challenge. Kelly didn't flinch. "I think you hide behind honesty to avoid being vulnerable. That's your armor. You call it authenticity, but it's just another wall." Howard chuckled, but the sound was hollow. And you think you're the only honest one here? You've made a career off emotions, crying on TV, being the relatable idol. You've turned sincerity into currency. Kelly met his stare. Maybe, but at least my intentions are to connect, not to humiliate. You built a brand on discomfort. I built mine on empathy. Big difference. Robin looked like she wanted to intervene, but nobody dared break the moment. Howard leaned forward, voice lowering. You want to psychoanalyze me? Go ahead. Tell me who you think I am. Kelly took a slow breath. You're someone who used to love this. The rawness, the honesty. But somewhere along the way, you stopped listening. You started mistaking control for truth. You poke until people bleed just to remind yourself you still can. That landed like a slap. Even the producers behind the glass froze, their headsets half raised. Howard's tone turned icy. So now I'm a villain. That's the story you're writing? Kelly shook her head. Not a villain. Just someone stuck playing a part that doesn't fit anymore. The world's changed, Howard. People don't want cruel honesty. They want real connection. Howard smirked, but his voice was tight. Connection. You think the world needs more fake smiles and polite interviews? Kelly's answer was steady. No, it needs truth with compassion. Those things can exist together. The studio fell into an uneasy silence. Howard's hand tapped the desk rhythmically, a tell he probably didn't even realize he had. His posture shifted. For the first time, he looked less like the predator and more like the person being examined. You think I'm broken, he said finally. Kelly's reply was calm, almost soft. I think you've forgotten why you started. You wanted to be real, but real doesn't mean ruthless. Howard exhaled sharply, leaning back. You've got guts, Clarkson. I'll give you that. Most people fold by now. I'm not most people, she said simply. The red recording light flickered overhead, the only sound in the room besides the faint hum of equipment. Both of them sat still, locked in silent recognition that neither would walk away unchanged. Howard's producer signaled to cut for commercial, but Howard waved him off. No, he muttered. Let it run, he leaned forward again. You really think I can't change, don't you? Kelly smiled faintly. I think anyone can, if they actually want to. It wasn't just a line, it was a challenge, and this time Howard didn't laugh. Howard stared across the desk, eyes narrowed, his breathing slow and deliberate. The air between them felt like it could snap. You really think people change because someone calls them out on the radio? He asked, half sneering, half searching. Kelly's tone was steady, the same tone that had carried her through years of live TV, award shows, and scrutiny. No, she said. I think people change when they finally see themselves clearly. Sometimes it takes a mirror they don't like. For a moment, Howard just stared. The weight of her words hung heavy. Robin looked from one to the other, unsure if she was watching an interview or an intervention. You think this is therapy? Howard finally said, a bitter laugh breaking the silence. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. I don't need lessons in self-awareness. Kelly leaned forward, not combative, just calm. Then why are you so defensive? Howard froze, the grin faltering. Defensive? Yes, Kelly said quietly. Every time someone challenges you, you turn it into a joke. You make it entertainment, but sometimes it's not about being right. It's about being human. The sound booth was dead quiet now. Even the hum of the monitors felt distant. Howard looked down for a second, fiddling with his pen. When he spoke again, his tone had softened. Barely. You know, Clarkson, most people come in here to play along. They laugh, they dodge, they give me a headline. But you, he trailed off, almost surprised by his own hesitation. You came here ready for a fight. Kelly's smile was faint but warm. No, Howard. I came here ready for a conversation. You just assumed it had to be a fight. He let out a long breath, leaning back. You really don't give me an inch, do you? Should I? She asked. You don't give anyone else one. That line broke the tension for a second. Robin laughed, not mockingly, but out of sheer disbelief at how composed Kelly still was. Even Howard cracked a smirk, rubbing his temple. You know, you might be the first guest who actually made me think twice before talking. Kelly tilted her head. Then maybe this wasn't such a bad interview after all. Howard chuckled softly, but it wasn't the same laugh he started with. Don't get too comfortable. I'm not apologizing. I'm not asking you to, Kelly replied. Just to realize that tough doesn't always mean cruel. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful, like two people who had finally stopped trying to win and started trying to understand. Howard exhaled again, eyes fixed on the microphone. You're good at this, he muttered. You know that? Kelly smiled. Talking? Or standing up for myself? Both, Howard said. Most people can't handle me for 5 minutes. You lasted half an hour and didn't crack. Kelly grinned. Maybe I just know when not to let someone else write my story. That one hit home. Howard didn't reply. He just looked down, the smirk gone, the moment finally quiet. The producer behind the glass motioned again to cut, but Howard waved him off without looking up. The interview wasn't technically over, but something in the room had already shifted for good. The energy in the room had shifted. The fire that filled every exchange earlier was now replaced with something quieter, something heavier, respect wrapped in tension. Howard tapped his pen against the desk again, this time not in irritation but in thought. You ever wonder, he said slowly, if being nice all the time wears you down? Like you're carrying everyone else's expectations? Kelly's expression softened a little. Of course it does. But that's not why I do it. Kindness isn't about being liked. It's about not becoming what hurt you. Howard looked up at her, the sarcasm gone for once. You really believe that, don't you? I have to, Kelly said. If I didn't, this industry would eat me alive. I've seen what bitterness does to people. It's poison. And you're too smart for that. That last line hit him differently. Robin noticed it right away. Howard blinked a few times, then laughed, but this time it wasn't his trademark laugh. It was quieter, almost uncertain. You think I'm bitter? I think you've been fighting for so long that you forgot what it's like to just talk, Kelly replied. You came into this job trying to expose truth. Somewhere along the way, it became about winning instead. Howard looked down, fingers tracing a line across the desk. Winning's the only thing that keeps you relevant. Or it's what makes you lonely, Kelly countered softly. That line hung in the air longer than any argument they'd had. The control booth was silent. Even the sound engineer, usually unshakable, sat frozen. Howard finally leaned back, staring at the ceiling. You know, I didn't expect this, he said half to himself. You came in here ready to go toe-to-toe, and instead you turned the whole thing into a mirror. Kelly smiled gently. Maybe that's what you needed. Everyone needs a mirror sometimes. Howard rubbed the bridge of his nose, chuckling under his breath. You're good, too good. You should have been a therapist instead of a singer. Kelly laughed lightly. Music is therapy, at least the kind I make. For the first time in nearly 40 minutes, the room didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like two people sitting across from each other, exhausted but finally honest. Howard sighed, eyes softening. You know, I've had presidents, movie stars, rock legends in that chair. They all try to charm me or dodge me. You're the first one who actually made me listen. Kelly shrugged modestly. Then maybe it wasn't a waste of time. Howard nodded slowly. No, he said. It definitely wasn't. Through the glass, the producer made the cut signal again, but Howard didn't move. The on-air light still glowed red, casting a dim halo over the studio, a silent witness to a conversation that had stopped being an interview and become something much more human. The silence stretched long enough for everyone to realize this wasn't a performance anymore. Howard's voice, usually dripping with control and ego, came out quieter than anyone expected. You really think I've lost touch with people, huh? Kelly didn't rush her answer. I think you stopped trusting them, she said. Somewhere along the way, you started assuming everyone was out to fool you, so you hit first. You call it honesty, but it's just armor. Howard let out a dry laugh. Armor's what keeps you alive in this business. Kelly nodded slightly. Maybe, but it also keeps you isolated. That landed harder than either of them seemed ready for. Howard's face softened, his eyes fixed on the empty space between them. "You think I'm too far gone?" he asked quietly. Kelly smiled faintly. "No one's too far gone. You built something powerful, Howard. Maybe it's time to rebuild it differently." For a long moment, Howard said nothing. The red on-air light buzzed faintly in the background, casting a dim glow over the console. He finally leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "You know what's funny?" he said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're supposed to be the guest here, but I feel like you just interviewed me." Kelly grinned. "Maybe that's what happens when two people stop pretending." Robin chuckled softly, breaking the tension. "I think the world just witnessed Howard Stern lose a debate, and maybe his cool." Howard shot her a look, but there was humor behind it now. "Careful, Robin, don't ruin my reputation." Kelly laughed. "I think your reputation can handle a little honesty." Howard sighed, shaking his head. "You know, I started this thing wanting a reaction, some raw emotion, something real. I guess I got it." Kelly's tone was gentle but firm. "You did, just not the kind you expected." He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "You're right." For a moment, they both sat there in silence. It wasn't awkward. It was understanding, earned, not forced. The kind that only comes when two people stop performing and finally just talk. Howard gestured to the producer behind the glass. "Cut it," he said softly. The red light flicked off and the studio fell into a calm, almost sacred quiet. "You know," he said, glancing up at her, "you actually got through to me. That doesn't happen much." Kelly stood, unhooking her mic. "Then it was worth coming in." He smiled, just slightly. "I guess it was." She started toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Howard," she said, "you've got one of the biggest platforms in the world. You could do a lot with it, more than shock people. You could remind them that honesty doesn't have to hurt." He watched her for a moment, then nodded once. "Maybe I'll think about that." Kelly smiled. "That's all I wanted." As she walked out, the door clicked softly behind her. Howard sat there alone, the hum of the equipment fading. For the first time in a long time, the man who'd made a career of speaking his mind had nothing left to say. The interview never aired. Officially, there were technical difficulties. But everyone in that room knew the truth. Kelly Clarkson had done what no one else had in decades. She hadn't just survived a Howard Stern interview. She'd disarmed him, and for once the king of shock radio was silent.